Hello, I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome to CubeWise Business Innovation Week. My name is Andrea Ludwig, and joining me today is Chris Wetzel, Technical Account Manager for CubeWise North America, and Chris Yate, who is a Business Development Manager out of our UK office. Because I do have two Chris's with me today, I will be referring to them as Mr. Wetzel and Mr. Yate. If I mess up and say Chris, we may have some awkward moments, so let's see how that goes. I will say too, obviously, thank you. I see some familiar names on this webinar. This is the end to our three-part Business Innovation Week webinar series. We kicked off Tuesday with Kevin from the Netherlands out of our supply focus team to talk about supply chain. And then yesterday we had Martin Winkler from our Swiss team talking about consolidation and close. And today we're wrapping up with financial forecasting. And besides that, as I've said on these other ones, there's a lot going on kind of in the PA and ecosystem along with at CubeWise. We had the North American Team One World Championship qualifier a few weeks ago, and shout out to Daniel for taking the first place on that in North America. And the European qualifier is being held tomorrow. And all of this leads up to that Team One World Championship being held in Orlando this October at IBM Tech Exchange. I'm not sure if many of you have been to Tech Exchange, but this will be its third year. And I will tell you, it's a great event. You have, Plan Analytics is a core focus at this event. So you have people like the Mike McGeehan's, the Tracy Pepe's, Stuart King. So you have the product managers and you have the developers and Hubert Hager. So it's a great place and a good place to get some face time. So with that, we'll kind of transition to the topic at hand around financial planning and forecasting. So as we talked about yesterday, there are, different trends that we see in the area. And one of the ones that we touched on yesterday that fits very well with this one is kind of that one application for different uses, consolidation and closing or financial forecasting and planning. So with that, there are a few other ones I want to bring Mr. Wetzel in to kind of expand on some of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace when we're out there talking to customers.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Everybody, my name's Chris Wetzel, Mr. Wetzel, I guess, on the call today. And yeah, I appreciate it. I'm a technical account manager with CubeWise. I'm based just north of Atlanta, so I'm in the kind of southeast region for CubeWise. So yeah, Andrea. So yeah, every organization, is kind of at a different point in their analytics journey. We, everybody's kind of has a different stage of where they're at, and it's kind of like building a house. You want to make sure you don't start with the roof, right? You kind of start with a solid foundation and a good plan, right? So it's probably best practice is not to jump into the most complex kind of forecasting, techniques, but, have a good plan and work your way through that. What I'm seeing in the market is a big shift, right? Finance teams are actively moving away from the static Excel models that people have relied on for years. And they're starting to get more comfortable and stepping more into dynamic and kind of AI-driven forecasting, right? To automate things and to simplify the processes for them. As you imagine, the traditional methods of Excel and the manual processes, you struggle and they struggle with challenges just connecting to the data sources or cleansing the data. And these things can be automated, right? That's the beauty of the technology today and some of the modern FP&A applications. And if you're not automating those things, right, the complexity gets kind of tripled or added, I would say, especially because people want to do forecasting at different levels of detail, right? So when you have your sales team want to plan at different levels from your operating expense teams, right? Those little complexity or different levels add some nuances to getting to the data and cleansing the data and making it available for the users. And as you know, the techniques we see span anything from really simple trend analysis to driver-based models, all the way up to AI and even machine learning that can adjust in real time and model your data and your scenarios. So Andrea, just in your opinion, I guess, if I throw it back to you, what are some of the things you're hearing from customers from kind of desired outcomes or benefits they're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, maybe Chris, before we go to Andrea, I can probably chip in because I really like the house analogy that you gave there. It's certainly how I start to think about kind of that analytical journey that businesses would go on. So maybe for the benefit for everyone on the call, as Andrea said, I'm Chris Yates. I'm the business development manager for CubeWise here in the UK. I've been with CubeWise now since 2017, but prior to that was working within finance for the majority of my career to that point. And I guess, yeah, a lot of the things there, Chris, that you've described, I've got experienced firsthand, and equally then, worked with tools to be able to focus on those business problems. But I think you made a really interesting point there that you don't start with an AI powered forecast. Like you have to start with that solid foundation of data. For many teams, that might be moving away from the static models that you described, and then kind of thinking about, okay, what's the steps forward here? Is it that more dynamic driver-based planning? We've really started to see that certainly over here in the UK, and I believe in the US as well, and around the world, that kind of first-hand shift where organizations are looking to more that enterprise level planning and the solutions that come with that. Where you see those predictive algorithms coming in, the real-time data analysis and integration help to then build on the driver-based forecasting.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you think about some of these things that we're talking about, like the trends, they vary from some of the more, as we'd say, basic functionality of having an EPM tool. So if someone's in offline Excel, their requests are going to be more of, yeah, I want my data, I want my tool to get, updated overnight. So I'm not, copy and pasting to update and actualize actuals. Some of that more basic stuff or that real-time data, or being able to kind of, hit a button and have that data then automatically updated versus, like I said, that manual process. But once we have customers that already have that foundation, we do see more requests that are a little more advanced. And sometimes it can be, the simple driver-based planning or the use of kind of some of those more algorithms, using Python and going in Python libraries, like we were kind of showing on the supply chain webinar on Tuesday. And another trend that we're seeing, obviously, there's a lot of buzz around AI. And I think even if you think of how you all are probably interacting with AI on a daily basis. I know I use Microsoft Copilot every day and it's amazing. But like even how we interact and ask questions or do things with that, we're seeing businesses want that same capability too. We are going through numerous POCs around kind of, I'll say it in a way of talking to your models. And I know you might think, well, that's not exactly forecasting, planning and accuracy, but in some ways it is, because it's like, hey, you got that part done, but now you're trying to, whether it's the reporting of the trends around that or people want that information. So how do you kind of get that to other folks in the organization?
Yeah, it's a good point, Andrea. And I think if I can just interject here, I think the important thing is, don't bite off more than you chew, kind of the theme here a little bit. Especially when it comes to new technology, right? I always tell people, right, don't try to do everything at once. Start small, pick an area of focus, and test it with real scenarios, and definitely involve those stakeholders, right? IT, finance, operational folks, to fully understand their needs and their workflows, right? So that way you can see what's working, what's not working, and you can kind of build momentum and confidence along the way with internally with your group. So once you got that approach, right, it fits your business, you can start to scale. Obviously structured, right? This approach will get you all the benefits of the innovation without kind of losing control, so to speak. And I'm pretty sure from a finance perspective, losing control is kind of like a dirty word. And so, building trust and confidence in your forecast is pretty much a must-have. And Chris, I don't know if you can attest to some of that as well, right? In your
absolutely
your
right. Yeah, no, I mean, just drawing on previous experiences, you're preparing a budget or a forecast, as the finance team, you have to be able to stand behind that, right? And defend that maybe at times when the businesses are challenging you. Well, these are, we've got to this number through X, Y, and Z, and we believe in that number. And I suppose
the data points behind it. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that you kind of talked there, Chris, about building confidence and ultimately the control. Understanding that where traditionally maybe you were going through through that laborious process of having a manual the Excel file that you were having to work through, and then you've got the version 2, and then you've got the version 2 final and the version 2 final 2, and we've already seen that kind of Excel iteration, right? And then someone's added a formula in an Excel cell that you weren't expecting, and you start to kind of see some of those issues coming in from an Excel perspective. Again, when you're migrating then away from that to more of that enterprise level planning, as I said, you still need to have the confidence and build the confidence in that solution. And 100% agree with the approach that you described there. For me, it's not about chasing every new technology, whether it be other solutions or looking at AI in general. For me, it's about identifying the business problem and finding the best solution that fits for that business problem. So starting small, maybe working in just looking perhaps at expense planning, or or maybe just the FP&A planning before you get into the workforce planning, or whatever the case may be. But you start with that process, and you learn from it, and you build the confidence in the solution, and then it kind of very organically then starts to expand in perhaps upstream or downstream within the process, then to add more value within the wider finance context.
Yeah, Chris, I think one thing you said on there very I liked it was figure out kind of what some of your business challenges are and your opportunities. And that goes back to I've talked to a few different businesses that are like, hey, we just bought this this AI tool, and now we're trying to figure out how to use it, and we're trying to force almost like forcing things. So it's like the chicken before the egg. And kind of think of some of the things that your organization is maybe spending way too much time on. What are things of the people that maybe work for you or yourself or other teams that if you could do X, Y, Z, it would reduce the time savings by 20 to 30%. And when you think of that thing, then you start with that and kind of go from there. So to Chris's point, though, starting small, versus you don't want to boil the ocean.
Yeah, and I'm hearing too from the kind of the finance management teams too, right? They're like, hey, this stuff looks great, right? It's super powerful, like it looks wonderful, but to come back to the controls, auditability, and the trust, right? How do I balance that with governance and stuff? And a lot of the questions I'm hearing too is like, where do I start, right? Or what do I actually need to get started? And a common one is also, is my data even organized enough to take advantage of some of these things in the first place? Yeah. So it's very practical kind of questions that come out, but there's good approaches to doing this to get buy-in and momentum within your organization. So Chris, I'll just throw it over to you if you have some showcase examples you want to share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps just while I'm sharing my screen here then. So, we've talked around a couple of different techniques that we can adopt. The whole kind of thought process there really is going from that modernization, and then being able to get to a point where you can start to do your financial forecasting in real time. And so maybe just to kind of show you some examples of techniques that we can deploy there. So again, I alluded to it earlier in terms of that starting small, but I'm just going to be focusing on my expense planning here for a moment. And what you'll see is in terms of the forecast that I'm working on my baseline plan. So this is the foundation. This is the the level in which we need to build the confidence and trust within the data. And then from here, we can then expand with things like scenario planning and what-if analysis, which we'll see in a little moment. Again, I'm kind of approaching this as a finance business partner that's going through that budget cycle. So we're obviously at this point in time looking at an entire. Well, maybe if I change this, we're looking at a total company, but also we can then start to drill down into the individual companies and business units within there. So again, if I just select one of my companies here, go into my marketing department, what you'll see here is, again, the idea is that it's very intuitive in terms of how we can use the data that we have within the system to then automatically drive the forecast that we're working on. So the example here, if I just pop this one open full screen, I'm just looking at the OPEX accounts, right? And you can see here, if I take the salaries, our expectation for the salary is that we're going to have our last year's estimate plus then the X%. So we're seeing there's a 5% uplift here on the last year actuals. And of course, we're seeing that increase in salaries. And it's like, okay, well, what do we see then if that then increases to the 10%? and what's the impact on the value there. And we can see then, you know, it's refreshing in real time to update the forecast value. Yeah, but we might not always have the previous year to refer back to. We can see here, for example, we don't have any training costs associated with the previous year. So, you know, what can we do to, you know, adopt that kind of real-time driver-based planning to include some training costs within our budget here. So I'll just pop open another screen now. What you'll see here, again, we've just got our training costs. In this case, I just want to refer to another account that we have got values against. And in this case, I'm just going to choose our salaries. So the approach here, you know, the driver for training cost is salaries in this example. And we're saying that we're expecting training costs there to be around about 3% of our total salary. Of course, we can input this number in real time and see the impact on what that's having with the plan value there. Again, even if I went to the 10%, we can see that in real time the plan value or the total cost of the training is being updated in real time based on the driver that we've input, the driver being the percentage uplift and indeed the reference account there.
Yeah, and let me jump in. Like when you look at this screen though, think of, you know, someone using this, an end user, the ease and the simplicity. Drop down here, select a driver. Hey, we're modeling after a different account. When I kind of go back to my days in March planning, when I was even just doing percent to LY, this is in Excel, and I was like, hey, equals that times 0.015. All right, I have to change it to 10%. And if we have to model after a different vendor, if we're bringing a new vendor, I'd have to go get that data from an old vendor, paste it in and start from there, versus here we're able to just do that drop down model after something that already exists. Just think of the time savings and that ease of use in this clean screen. And there's you know, right there, he picked that drop down, these few other things came up, boom, you're done. And just kind of think of the savings that you get when you do something like this.
Again, it's not, you know, we're not trying to take on too much here. It's simply, you know, we're taking the data that we already have and the business logic that we know. You know, in this use case, we know that our training costs are expected to be a percentage of the salary, right? So we're just bringing data around from parts of the business and then applying those drivers and seeing the results in real time then. Again, it's not just about the total year value as well. Of course, then we've got the drivers that are based on the phasing as well. So you can see in this case, we're currently phasing it evenly across the year, but that might not be reflective of your training requirements, right? So we might say, well, what would happen if we said, actually, we're only going to incur training in the first half of the year? And again, we can see in real time now how that's updated then to spread evenly across the first half of the year. Maybe we have a quarterly training process, right? Where we every quarter or the first month of every quarter, the team have to do training, right? So again, these are the kind of drivers and the logic that you can implement within that enterprise level planning solution to really add value to the accuracy of the forecast in real time then. And again, then, you know, we're coming in and we're seeing that flow all the way through, obviously through into the full P&L. Again, just as an example of where we've seen that kind of driver-based planning adding value. But I think, Chris, for me, there was you asked some interesting questions as you were handing over to me there, right? So, you know, where do I even start? And I think I alluded to that a little bit earlier, but for me, it's about really identifying that business problem. You know, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Okay, we're talking about financial forecasting in real time, but maybe the business problem is my current forecast cycle takes 5 weeks, and actually, you know, we've seen examples where we've taken clients from 5 weeks down to maybe 5 to 7 days, and a huge time saving there across the finance department by implementing solutions such as this. You said as well, you know, is the data organized enough? I think again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier on there, Chris, right? Is that you really need the solid foundation for the planning house, if you like. And without the solid foundation there, you even the best models will struggle. But you can use driver-based solutions here to enrich data as well. So it might be that you're not getting all the data you need from source, and that's where we can then add that business acumen and the understanding that the finance team have. Say, okay, well, you know, here's the data I'm getting from source. here's where I can, and we can get that in automated. Here's then I can add some drivers or some adjustments to add value to the forecast process.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, too, if I just add a little bit, right, having these methods, right, for how you actually, did your forecast is super helpful, right? You can go back, 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and you can see exactly how those accounts were, forecasted. So super helpful there.
Yeah, and it's not just about the baseline that I was referring to as well there, right? Everything I've done so far has been in the baseline plan, but what would you say if we were just taking salaries, for example? Maybe we want to say, well, our baseline that we've published is that we're expecting a 10% uplift on last year, but best case scenario, maybe it's only the 2%. And this is where we can then start to use those comparisons now. Okay, well, we know what our baseline value is based on the calculations we did before, but actually what would then, in the best case scenario, what would that look like if it was only the 2%? And again, you can then start to bring that kind of scenario planning logic on top of the driver-based planning that you're performing to really elevate the forecast process in real time there. Andrea, I don't know if there are any thoughts you have on the driver-based forecasting there and the experiences you've had with clients in implementing similar solutions.
Yeah, one thing I would add is, when we're doing some of these things, what we try to do in projects is, to kind of take your current process, but then also make improvements based on the power of the application. And Chris, that's some of the stuff you showed. And something that I was a big fan of, like you were doing, kind of driver-based plan for last year, we can even do, hey, let's just do a number. Let's put in maybe 5 million, have it spread based on different logic that you have. And another thing too, you can also have things round. And people might find that kind of funny, but when you're doing some large budgets, you don't want something, hey, 5,290 blah 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 dot 23 cents. Let's just have it be 5 million. So you can write that logic around to the nearest hundredths, whatever that number would be, of having those kind of basic numbers. Because when you think about your plans and targets, hey, it's easier to like, hey, we're doing 2.3 million, done, let's move on. So there's different types of things that people, also prioritize, but the flexibility that they get in the customization to kind of be able to plan the way that they want to, we find that super important and powerful within planning analytics. You kind of have some guardrails there, and you don't typically build everything for everyone. But when you have a tool like this that brings everyone, you're talking about the logic, and you want to make sure you're getting like 80 to 90% of what people want, so they don't go to offline Excel. That's what's also really important, making sure that you have the right key stakeholders in when you're doing some of these requirements or going through embarking on a project like this, because you don't want it to be, oh, hey, you have 2 people telling you exactly what they want, and the next thing you know, you launch the application and everyone else is still going off to offline Excel because they don't like how it was built. And we have seen that happen when we come into different businesses, when they're like, well, people aren't using the current application, which is why we're out for an RFP. And then that's where kind of we get invited in to talk to customers. So I think that's also a key thing to think about when you're embarking on some of these modernizations or changes within an organization.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is efficiency. I always come back to the analogy of how can I make sure that I go home on time? How can I make sure that I'm seeing the kids before they go to bed, right? Because it's the middle of the
you don't want to
forecast
work till
cycle,
midnight?
right? We're in the middle of the forecast cycle, and it's the numbers changed at the last minute, but we've got a presentation to board next week or whatever, right? So how can we recognize those business problems and again make the finance department more efficient? And that's partly with the forecasting that we've talked about here, but I also think it's super relevant from a reporting perspective as well. Again, if we consider that kind of natural transition then from we've prepared our forecast and then we're then flowing into the next year and we're looking at that more from a reporting. Actually, it's mastering the financial reporting in real time there as well, and understanding the variance analysis and getting more clarity on the performance of the business there. Now, of course, the traditional method, if you like, is once you have pull together the data from your actuals, pull it through from the ERP, and you've obviously got your forecast here from your previous iteration. You could then start the manual process of going through and drilling down into the individual areas that we were looking at. We're looking at the marketing, and we can see, okay, where is the variance taking place across the different entities or the different types of expenses that we're incurring. But as we're talking about, in terms of about being more efficient and getting to the end result as quickly as possible. This is where we've started to introduce, or clients are starting to introduce the concept of these, the generative AI to capture the analysis that they may spend half an hour, an hour at a time analyzing the data to get to the commentary that they need. Actually, how can we get that more efficiently? And so, yeah, just an example of how that could work across different areas. We've got, the different types of analysis here. So in this case, we're going to use the virtual assistant here to look at the variance analysis on the expenses. And I'm just going to run that, and just with a very simple prompt, we're running the expense investigation. We're doing the expense variance analysis. It's then going to go through a workflow and have a look at what's going on there, and you can see it's now thinking about this now. So it's going into the planning analytics model, analyzing the variances, looking across the different dimensions that we have, everything that you would be doing manually during month end, in order to provide commentary on the variances that we're seeing. Actually, can we get to that more effectively through the use of generative AI? As you can see, pretty quick in terms of retrieving the response there. If I just show you some of the examples. So, we've got just some of the analysis that's taken place here, whether we've got the positive variances and the negative variances across the different areas. And you can see here, it's gone to quite a level of granularity in terms of legal and audit expenses, specifically within management, or other operating expenses within research, etc. It's providing insights and recommendations for improvement, and also then providing you with a summary which you can then copy to the clipboard and paste that out to go alongside your commentary pack there. So again, for me, whilst the example here is perhaps shown in the light of financial reporting, that's part of the having confidence and the understanding of your forecast as well, and using some of those more modern techniques to achieve your end result in a more efficient way.
Yeah, and this is just one example of kind of that use of Gen AI, and this is a trend that we are seeing out there in the marketplace. People wanting to be able to talk to their models. And a really good example of this is, even if you think of how IBM and their client zero story between HR and IT, they no longer have like the 1-800 numbers for their internal employees to call. And this was talked a lot about, I think, and the amount of money that they're saving, but it really is more like how we'd be interacting with, like I said earlier, Chat GPT, something like that, where there's to transfer an employee now, hey, I need to transfer Chris Yates from this division to that division. And it prompts the next question. So instead of going into a workforce planning model, they're just interacting within a chat. So it's really fascinating, some of the ways that companies are now changing what they're doing. And another thing that was talked a lot about at Think too was, not a lot, but this conversation that I was having was this concept of digital labor. So being able to kind of talk to your models, and I know talking to a lot of people that they know the models through and through. They know the cubes they need to be going to and planning, like, so they know all that. But the thing is, their boss may not, and their boss asks, "Hey, I need X, Y, Z." Still some ad hoc reporting. Then they have to stop what they're doing and go pull that because it's high priority. Well, with the example that Chris used, that ability kind of talk to your models and say you don't have to know where everything is, but you can ask those questions and have that automatically pull up for you. So that is something that we're kind of seeing, doing different proof of concepts with people. And just like I said, things are definitely changing. We're going from, and obviously, as we also said, people are at all different stages. And it's just, it's just important to keep moving forward on the analytical journey, whether you're offline Excel and trying to get into the EPM space, or you already have that solid foundation there and you want to keep moving forward and talk about kind of the use of different AI. It's definitely something that if you're interested in, you can, reach out to your local office at CubeWise. I'll put the contact us link in the chat shortly. But yeah, I guess, kind of wrapping up here as we're close to time. If there's anything else either of the Chris's would like to add, and if there's any questions from the audience, feel free to put that in the chat. This obviously is being recorded and will be put on YouTube. So, but let us know if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Chris, anything you wanted to kind of wrap up with?
Yeah, Andrea, maybe just a little insert here. You don't have to you don't need to deploy a huge, additional staff or have a huge budget for doing things like this, right? We certain companies, the big and the small companies, right, are able to do these type of things we just showed. So don't be kind of scared or put off that you think you have to have a huge army to support these type of efforts.
Nope, that is a great point. Thank you for that, Chris. And the kind of last thing I'll say as we wrap up, they also threw in a link for CubeWise events. That's a good website to go and kind of check out. You know, this was our Business Innovation Week. We'll be bringing Innovation Week back again. I think it's been in February the last 2 years, so around that time. But definitely just different events around the world. You know, as I said, like this week we brought in people from our global team because we are a global company. So if you're interested in the content, please reach out to your local office. And thank you
Great.
everyone for attending.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.